guess we're ready. Okay. This meeting is called to order. Good evening, everyone. This is the November 15th meeting of the Shrewsbury Select Board. Welcome to everybody in our audience. We don't usually have this many people here, but so welcome. We're going to go through our agenda this evening, and then we're going to have a little special section for our special guests here tonight. So we'll start with asking to approve the bills, payrolls, and warrants.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have motion second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Could I have a motion to act to approve the minutes of the November 1st meeting?
Move approval.
Second.
Have motion second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay, we have a few announcements this evening. We have a couple of awards that our employees received. We'd like to congratulate Joseph Kenny, Assistant Water and Sewer Superintendent, for receiving the Mass Waterworks Association Pride Award. The MWWA presents the Waterworks Pride Awards to unsung workers in the community waterworks systems who give that extra effort to inspire public confidence in their systems. The town of Shrewsbury was fortunate to hire Joe as the Assistant Water and Sewer Superintendent in December of 2020. Joe has set high performance standards and expectations for his staff, the contractors he interacts with, and has built a solid team. Congratulations, Joe. Rowan McAllister was selected by the Massachusetts chapter of the American Planning Association to receive the Emerging Planner Award. This award is given to an entry-level or mid-level career practicing planner who has excelled in leadership, increased the impact of planning in public and/or private sector decision-making, or enhanced the Massachusetts chapter of the American Planning Association. The award will be formally given on December 9th at the annual American Planning Association Massachusetts Awards Luncheon. So again, congratulations, Rowan. And the last announcement, or almost last announcement, is about yard waste collection and drop-off. Just a reminder to residents that the yard waste drop-off days will continue at the Highway Garage at 211 South Street from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Saturdays from November 19th through December 17th. Collection weeks at curbside pickup will be this week, November 14th through 18th, and November 21st through the 26th. Please note that next week is a holiday week, so Thursday's collections will be picked up on Friday, and Friday's collections will be picked up on Saturday. And please visit the Department of Public Works page on the town website at shrewsburymass.gov for more information. I have one more announcement this evening, if you'll indulge me. So, when I was first elected to this board in 1993, I was asked by the director of the pension system if I wanted to be in the pension system. And I said, no. How long am I going to be here? Maybe 6 years. So now I'm in my 30th year, and I wish I had got into the pension system, because even in our meager salary, which nobody does this for the money, by the way, I would have coffee money, monthly coffee money for life if I had got in the pension system. But in any event, I'm going to take this opportunity tonight to announce that I have decided to retire as a selectman at the end of this term. I've reached a point in my life where it's time to start a new chapter. I want to focus on my family and my health and other areas of interest. And for those who don't believe it, yes, I do have some other areas of interest. And the truth be told, since John LeBeau left, my really good friend and my co-selectman, I'm sorry, I'm going to say selectman because I think after 30 years I can still say it. You know, it's been really tough to get by without him. I've been going through withdrawal, so I just decided I needed to get up. I just couldn't do it anymore. I'm sure John will appreciate that. But Barbara, Dusty, and I want to spend warmer winters in Arizona, so that's really not possible to do. I know I could do some stuff remotely, but it's not right. So I'm going to go ahead and retire in May. I'd like to say that I can't express how honored, humbled, and lucky I feel that our fellow residents allowed me to do this for 30 years. I didn't do it on my own. The residents of this town 10 times allowed me to do this. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And I'm thankful for all the wonderful people that I've met, who've become friends, who I've been able to help, who I've been able to work with, like all of you. Through it all, I've never stopped learning, at least I hope I haven't, or lost my passion for the work that we do here on the board. Kevin, I just want to say that a big part of the reason I decided to run for the current term that I'm in is to work with you. I only had 2 years to work with you before this term, and I really wanted the opportunity. I appreciate your perspective, your openness to change, your willingness to listen, and I wish I had that skill level that you have. But you also respect the past, and I think that's really important at this time of transition for the town. You are building upon the legacy of Mr. Carney and Mr. Magato, but in the process, you're also building your own legacy. And I'm fortunate that I've gotten to work with you and with those gentlemen. Finally, I do not intend to slow down in any way from now until May. And I think if you know me, and I think you do know me, that it isn't even possible for me to do that. There's still a lot of work to be done, and I intend to honor my commitment to our fellow citizens and to you, my colleagues, until my last day on May 23rd. This has been an incredible, incredible experience, and I just thank everybody who made it possible. So, thank you. And now I'll ask that we move on to item 4, which is the town manager's report. So, Mr. Mizikar.
Thank you, Mr. DiPaolo. Members of the board, welcome everyone here in attendance. I just have one update with regards to yard waste. So due to a truck breakdown this afternoon, we only got about halfway through Tuesday's route. We're the whole way through Monday. We'll likely extend operations through Saturday. We do feel confident that we'll have this week done by Saturday, and then we'll start again on Monday and continue collections through the following Saturday. So we'll be providing some updates later in the week about Saturday collections if necessary. So that's all I have in my report.
Okay. Next on our agenda is public comment, but nobody applied to speak during this time, so we're going to move forward from that. And then our next meeting is with Girl Scout Troop 6533. I understand we have the Daisies here, so welcome to all of you. Mr. Mizikar would like to welcome you and say a few words to the group. So, Mr. Mizikar.
Well, good evening to all the Daisies. Who's a Daisy here in the room? Well, earlier this evening, this fine group had the ability to take a tour of the fire headquarters and then the police station. So I hope you all got to enjoy that. I think we made you work pretty hard for your Democracy for Daisies badge. So this is the final step. Mr. DiPaolo decided to extend that step for you a little bit this evening and make you work a little bit even harder for it. But it's a real honor to have you here with us this evening to participate in an open public meeting, which is a central part of any democratic process. So you certainly have earned your badges, and we're thrilled to be able to participate in just a small part of that. So We welcome you back anytime. We kind of hang out here on most Tuesday nights, so if you're not doing anything and you're kind of bored, you can feel free to join us. But it's just wonderful to see you all, and hopefully you had a fun evening. And if you ever need police or fire services or anything that we do here at the town hall, we're here for you, and we're your friends, and we'd be happy to help you. So we just thank you. Thank you to Mr. Fellian for reaching out in early September. It was a pleasure to be able to work with him and your team, and I hope it was a great evening.
And let me just say one thing in closing. I'm sure your moms and dads have told you this, but I'd like to say it anyways. You know, when my daughter, I always used to tell that she could be, when she grew up, whatever she wanted to be. And you can be whatever you want to be when you grow up. And I hope your mom and dads tell you that. And just as an example, you can see my colleagues here. There were 3 women here who once were little girls, and they grew up to be what they wanted to be. And some of the women that I've worked with on this board have been the chairpersons also. So you can be what you want. So don't let anybody hold you back, and look at my colleagues here and see that you can be what you want. So when you get older, if you want to be a select person, just remember you can do it if you want and you work hard. So good luck to you. And in a few years, we're going to come back and we're going to sit over there where you're sitting and watch you sit over here, okay? Is that a deal? Okay.
All right.
Great.
Thank you all. We really appreciate it. John, do you have anything to say, or are you guys all set?
No, that was wonderful.
All right.
Appreciate your time with us.
I think,
Thank you.
My dad.
is it okay if they come up for a picture?
Sure, if you want.
You all want to come up for a picture?
Do a picture.
Want to take a picture?
And get everybody kind of like in front of the town seal.
Can we do it? Stand in the front over here.
Yeah.
Right in the middle with everybody, okay?
You should stay because you're not in the troop.
Let's go. We'll stand behind.
Yeah, we'll go behind you guys.
Let's go.
What? We're not tall enough?
I thought you meant the kids.
No, we'll stand behind the kids.
Perfect. We would like that? Very good. Thank you. We would love to do this.
Let's move.
It's nice. Where are your teeth? You don't have any
This is
either.
a gavel, and this is what you get to use when you're the chairperson. So it's a good goal to have. You get to bang it to
Why
start
don't
the
you look
meeting.
that way at the camera?
All right, hold it for the picture.
It's okay, Victoria. Victoria, smile. Victoria.
Are you okay, Victoria? All done.
Victoria.
Definitely give it a. All right, we're adjourned. Meeting over. Thank you for coming and visiting with us. How are you?
Your hands are freezing, though.
Have a great night.
Thank you for coming.
Go home now.
Hey, Victoria. Victoria. Boy, smile.
Like hanging over.
Hi.
Smile, please. That's the smile. Smile.
No?
Please stop giving up. All right. All right, no picture. No picture. Come on.
People need time.
Victoria, I see hi in the big makeup.
All right.
I know.
Come on, you.
I speak today. Let's go. Thank you.
You guys.
Or April.
Yeah,
You gave me way more lead time.
yeah, I know. Okay.
She watches
All right, so, our next order of business is, public hearing with Frank Ukesetter, Uke LLC, DBA Brody's Diner, Frank Ukesetter, manager, 308 Hartford Turnpike, regarding an application for a common victuals license. Good evening.
Good evening. Hello.
Mr. Ricker.
My name is Richard Ricker. I'm here with Frank.
Okay. So,
That's a hard act to follow.
yeah, I know.
Yeah. Would you like to come up for a
That's a long day. That's a long day for
You were
those
saying
kids.
that's a
Like
real long
to have
day.
that energy.
That's a long day for those kids.
Yeah,
tell ya.
They look like they can handle it, okay.
Yeah, yeah. We're doing fine.
So, you're going to be the proprietor of Brody's, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going to happen? Is it same hours, same staff, or what?
Okay, basically, my plan is to keep Brody's exactly as it's running now. Our hours of operation will be Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 1:30 p.m., and on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, 6 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. We do not plan to change any of the staffing there. We'll probably actually add a few people. And the two ladies that have been there since
Since
since Bob began,
14 years ago.
will continue to oversee and operate the business.
Okay. Questions from members of the board?
No?
Okay. This is a
I was only here just in case you needed moral support. I saw the Girl Scouts.
yeah.
Yeah, all that
I don't
confidence.
know, those kids started asking you questions, you could have been in trouble. Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody who'd like to be heard on this matter? Okay, there being none, what's the pleasure of the board?
I move to close the public hearing.
second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay, so we have an application in front of us. What is the pleasure of the board?
I move that we approve, let's see, Frank Ukesetter, Uke LLC, DBA Brody's Diner, as manager, 308 Hartford Turnpike, regarding his application for a common victuals license.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with retirement.
Thank you.
Yes.
It'll be,
Congratulations.
I'm not sure it'll be the retirement everybody thinks it'll be.
We should have given you a hand.
Okay, our next order of business is a meeting with Lisa Morales, proposed manager of Rapal Inc., DBA Willikers Tex-Mex and Barbecue, 896 Hartford Turnpike, regarding an application for a change of manager to their Section 12 all alcohol pouring license. Good evening.
Hello.
So, nothing's changing, just going to change manager.
Correct.
Hours, everything are the same.
Everything's gonna be the same.
Okay. So, are you currently working? Have you been working there?
Yes, I've been working there as assistant manager for a few years now.
Okay. So, anybody have any questions? Nope. Nope? Okay. Have anything you'd like to add?
No.
So, this is not a public hearing, so unless anybody has any questions, I'll ask for a motion to allow for the change of manager.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the change of manager. So Lisa Morales will be the manager of Ripple Inc., DBA Willikers Tex-Mex and Barbecue, 896 Hartford Turnpike, regarding an application for a change of manager to their Section 12 all alcohol pouring license.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, so voted. You're all set.
All right,
I
thank
told you
you.
people can painless.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Select Board.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Good evening. Okay, next order of business is to review the fiscal 2024 revenue manual. Who's
All right.
going to take that?
I'm gonna take
Mr.
that.
Are you?
Yep. So as we have been doing for the last 3 or 4 years at this point, We're happy to present the fiscal year 24 revenue manual. The revenue manual sets forth in detail all the available funds that we'll consider for use within the fiscal year 24 budget. Taylor, it's okay, you can go ahead. I'll walk through the details in each one of these areas. I think it's important at the outset of the budget process to really go through the various aspects of funding that we're projecting at this point. It's subject to a couple changes customarily throughout the budget process. The tax levy itself, since it's a formulaic calculation, will largely remain the same, although slight changes prior to setting the tax rate may occur next fall. State aid is subject to change upon the publication of the first budget by Governor-elect Healy. And in any year in which there's a new governor elected, often the budget process is delayed by over a month. So customarily, the state budget is presented by the end of January. I wouldn't foresee that happening until sometime near the end of February, which would be after we publish fiscal projection 1. So we'll see what the timeline is, though, but that's likely subject to change as we understand what this administration approach is going to be. We'll talk just briefly about utility revenue, as those things will continue to shape up as we look at rates for the upcoming fiscal year. Talk about local receipts, free cash, some levy reduction measures, and then other available funds. So from the outset, we are looking at a little over $171 million that will be available for expenditure for fiscal year 24. And that's up over the roughly $166.7 million that were utilized in the FY23 budget. Taylor, if you can go ahead. So I know this is really hard to see, and I apologize for that, but we're trying to be as clear as possible on how these numbers are calculated. So this is the most detailed slide we have this evening, and it walks through the calculation of the estimate of the base tax of the tax levy in total. That includes the base tax levy, which comes in and is a formula provided through Proposition 2.5, where we're increasing the maximum allowable levy for fiscal year 23, which is higher than the 93 that's shown. It was actually $94,106,000. So using that levy limit, we add 2.5%, and then $955,000 is being estimated for new growth, which brings us to a base tax levy of just shy of $97.5 million. And then below is the detail associated with the various debt service projects that have been excluded from the provisions of Proposition 2.5. So these are the funds that we need to cover the principal and interest payments for our debt service, which at this point requires $9,582,202. So taking the base tax levy and the exempted tax levy and putting those together, we're projecting $106,996,091 that would be raised through the tax levy for fiscal year 24. Tax levy is obviously our largest source of funds, and now we'll turn over to the second largest source, which is state aid. So state aid is comprised of two main components: general unrestricted government aid, which used to be known as lottery aid, and school aid, sometimes called Chapter 70. School aid is obviously the largest source. We're estimating a $30 per pupil increase, which has been the minimum threshold increase over the last few years for school aid. That brings a total of just over $20.8 million. General unrestricted aid is being increased just slightly, a little less than 1%, $3,372,000. The other significant aspect of state aid is Chapter 90 funds, which are dedicated to roadway improvements at just less than $1 million. That number has been consistent, as is the formula based on roadway mileage, and an estimated $20 million transportation bond bill each and every year, or Chapter 90 bond bill each and every year, which has been the amount that's been issued for the last 8 years. Totaling $25,453,779 in state aid, which is slightly over 1%, slightly less than 1% greater than the fiscal year 23 budget. Utility revenue, we'll spend a lot more time on this as we go through the budget process. We are projecting just a slight increase at this point in time in total, up fiscal year 23 budget, 19.4 million. We're projecting 20.2 million for fiscal year 24. The largest source continues to be sewer revenue, followed by water revenue. We are looking at the revenue requirements for water and sewer. It's been since 2018, July of 2018, since the water rate was adjusted. Obviously, we were being pressed by inflation, and those dollars that we've committed to capital improvements just don't go as far, literally, as they used to. And our operating expenditures are further requiring more attention and eating into the funds that remain for capital based on that original plan that we put in place in 2018. So we'll continue to keep the board up to date, but we're projecting a little over $20 million in revenue coming in from the utilities. That would include indirect offsets which cover costs within the operating budget associated with DPW administration and general town administration as well. Go ahead forward, Taylor. Cable Public Access Fund, this is a straight, simple enterprise fund where we receive funds from Selco and pass them along to Shrewsbury Media Connection. This is a declining amount each year as subscribers continue to be reduced. And this number is subject to change as we have to strike a new franchise agreement with Selco no later than March of this year. We've been in negotiations between myself and the general manager. Within the next few weeks, we'll be presenting a initial proposed draft franchise agreement to the board for your consideration. So this number is subject to change, but we want to keep as much funding going to fund public access as possible. Taylor. So Schedule A receipts is our third largest revenue category, and it makes, we're projecting an increase over the fiscal year 23 number, which is 11.9 million, up to 12,355,000. Motor vehicle excise tax continues to be the single largest category, representing almost 50% of total local receipts. Unfortunately, the fiscal year 22 budget was the first year-over-year decline, if you exclude the pandemic, that we've seen in over a decade. And that has required us to make some adjustments to our projection for fiscal year 24. Concerned that we won't meet the individual line item total for motor vehicle excise that we are showing here on the screen for the fiscal year 23 budget, but we have great confidence that that would be made up by other categories which we're more conservative in. So motor vehicle excise tax will come in somewhere around 6 million as we continue to work through these numbers, but I am happy that we can press forward with a somewhat modest increase in receipts, which will provide us with additional resources over what we have in the FY23 budget. So these are just a couple comparison charts. One here on the left is showing our budget to actual performance. As part of our financial policies, which the board will be considering at your next meeting, based upon this information provided, we have been very conservative in our budget and targeting the creation of free cash when we do so. So any funds that come in over what we budget in the local receipts category flow directly to free cash. And we want to use as much resources as we possibly can, but still be conservative enough not to miss the mark and have a negative impact on free cash. So as we look forward to fiscal year 23, we are projecting an increase over what we have budgeted for fiscal year 24, but is still safely below what we actually received in fiscal year 22. So obviously, one of the concerns that I have with local receipts is it's our most elastic receipt when it comes to general economic conditions in the town, where the property tax is really stable. Proposition 2.5 allows us to, rely upon those numbers very steadily. But local receipts are extremely subject to economic conditions, as we can see in the motor vehicle results over the last few years. And then if the country or the economy were to slip into a recession and people were to pull back on spending and how often they go out to eat, we could see a decline. So it's good that we're in a conservative position, because even if we would slip a little bit, we would still be able to comfortably meet our budgeted amount and provide the services that we anticipated from the beginning of the year. Okay, so free cash is a one-time source of revenue that's generated through unexpended appropriations and revenues that come in over budget. As the budget has grown over time, so has the amount of free cash that we have, which is important because free cash in your policy documents is set as a percentage of the total operating budget. Our free cash, when it was certified earlier this year, came in at $9.1 million, which is just slightly over the 5% mark that's set for total free cash that's supposed to be generated in an annual fiscal year. So we do plan to use roughly $2.6 million of that in the in the total expenditure plan for fiscal year 24. The vast majority, roughly 1.6 of that, would be dedicated to the capital improvement plan. Although we will work and look at those balances to see if there is an opportunity to increase the total capital funding that we have without compromising our overall free cash position. All right. And then within the the levy reduction category, these are funds that we put in place, whether they're free cash or that we may receive from Selco, whether it's the cable TV side, which again is subject to change this year with the negotiation of the franchise agreement, or the light agreement that really help to offset the total amount of dollars that need to be raised through the tax levy and benefit taxpayers. So given those negotiations that we have ongoing, one thing is clear is that with declining cable subscribers, that cable is not going to be able to continue to provide the levy support that it has in the past, and the franchise agreement needs to be appropriate to the cable subscribers and total revenue of the system. We certainly don't want to harm the system through the agreement with Selco. So we've kind of flipped those two numbers, and this is really just an exercise that I've gone through. It's not, there's nothing final about this. But as we look at the assets of the municipal light plant versus the assets of the cable revenue plant, as we project and move forward through this process, I'm kind of seeing those two things flip. And it's my desire in conversations with Selco to not receive any less dollars than we have in the past, and I would like to increase it, obviously, because we haven't been keeping up with inflation because the numbers have been staying the same over the years. So, but kind of turn those two numbers on their head, providing the same total amount that we have in the past, but just recognizing the changes in the agreements and relationships that we have with them. Finally, other available funds. These are funds that we often receive from particular sources that have to be dedicated for expenditure. So we receive additional funding from the light department to cover debt service, same from the cable side of things. That cable project, of course, is the fiber to the home, and the light revenue that is identified there is for funding debt service associated with the substation construction that they did a few years ago. And then finally, you'll see the cable public access funds are identified here as well as a other available funds. So in total, $1.8 million expected at this time. The main difference there, as you can see, is that there's no outstanding dollars to be drawn down upon what was raised for the library capital campaign. So that was just a 2-year initiative. And of course, we did some account transfers that may happen again, but we're not predicting any at this time. So no concern on the revenue reduction at this. It goes up and down based upon the needs and what we have in place at town meeting and special town meeting throughout the course of the year. So, all right, so just in summary, we go back to the introductory slide. Again, we're projecting the ability to use a little over $171 million for the fiscal year 24 budget, which is up from $166,669,075 for fiscal year 23. That takes into account largely changes associated with the tax levy and Proposition 2.5 and new growth that we're predicting. So happy to answer any other questions. We will be developing, based upon your comments this evening, if there are any, continue to refine these numbers, but would look to set out and use them at the outset of the budget process and have them inform your conversation next week about financial policies and objectives.
Okay, questions, members of the board? Mr. Simon?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Kevin, just a few questions. So looking through the revenue manual, talking about motor vehicle excise taxes to date, 7.45%. Is that a typical percentage, a little lower? And then do we get a profile? So how does it work when people buy cars? Because I would think we'd start to get clarity, understanding that February is the biggest tax month for that. We would start to have an understanding as to vehicles bought over the last several months. How do we get that report, and when can we get clarity? We would be able to project it somewhat, right? It's declining, and it's by statute in all the cars as they age. But
Yeah. So when you say when do we get that report, is it like when do we get the February billing?
yeah, like, for example, during the year, is it the billing, oh, okay, all these cars were bought, or do we get any interim reporting?
No, so we do have interim commitments, we call them. So the motor vehicle registry on an average year sends us between, it's a big range, but 5 and 8 total total commitments or the ability to bill out motor vehicle excise tax. And those interim billings do represent the acquisition of new and used motor vehicles. Those interim billings normally make up, I would say, probably 20% of the total, and then 80% does come through what's called Commitment 1 in February. And Commitment 1 in February is normally the cars that people have had for a year or more at that point in time. So that's why it's the biggest bulk. I'm just looking at the fiscal year 23 numbers right now. We have, that percentage that you referenced. We have collected $813,000 so far this year. If I compare that to last year at this time, we're way up. We only collected about $476,000. So I don't know if that's necessarily a trend, but it's a good sign, this far into the fiscal year that we have that much more revenue. So,
Okay, thank you. One other, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman.
sure.
Any other areas or what are the general trends in 23? Obviously, they're looking at 22 and 23, 24, looking at the trends, looking at for revenue, it's a little different, but looking what's coming in.
Yep.
Any areas that you see longer term that could be a challenge for us? Permits, obviously the next year or two,
Yep.
we have some more certainty as these projects get finished out.
Yep.
But any concern about if we do go into recession, a lot of those home projects that happened during COVID as they peter out and
Yep.
folks tighten their belts a little bit,
Yeah, I
Is that
mean.
an area that's,
I mean, it would be a concern, so, building permits are based upon value of estimated construction, so as costs have gone up, it's based on, per thousand. So, whether it's bolstered by inflation or, it's held harmless by inflation, so, we have continued to see growth in the licenses and permit area, which includes, building permit fees. So that continues to be strong, but it would be, one area of concern. It's grown to almost $1 million and, roughly 10% of local receipts. So if people do stop building, I would be concerned. But from what we're seeing in the number of large construction projects that could potentially come forward, those bigger commercial and residential ones, even one of those would be a significant buoy to kind of keep us at the new normal, which is about $800,000 a year.
so next few years should be okay. It's the volatility beyond those bigger projects that, as we trend this out, which is the
Right.
next part that we'll be talking about. Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a couple, I have
Miss-
just, so thinking about what you've presented here in terms of the statement and the commitment to the residents that we created with the 2021 override. I know the question on everyone's mind is,
Yep.
are there enough revenues? We're not looking at an override. How does this extend
Yep.
the durability of the current agreement? We talk about, managing our operating budget increases for the education at 4.25%, and then for municipal operating at 3.50. If you could just talk a little bit about where we are.
Yep. Yeah, so, we'll talk a little bit more about this on the forecast as well. But we continue to have revenues greater than we anticipated in our models that we used for the override. And that's because of the economic growth that we've experienced that we didn't anticipate whenever we were, and I don't know how we could have anticipated because we were in the middle of COVID at the time when we were going through the override process. Now, I think on the bad side of things, so to speak, like I am definitely seeing an end to the duration of this override, and it is gonna have a life of, 5 to 6 years, but it's not gonna be limitless. I mean, we all knew that. I think that, we'll have to have some more detailed conversations about those expenditure limits because they are starting to show their hand on that duration, so we're starting to hit that. To this point in the override, and what we're projecting to go in, which we'll talk a little bit more about, again, on the next one, the next agenda item, is that we've put more money into the override stabilization fund at this point than our original projections as well. So, it's not that we've spent more money than we thought we were gonna spend. We've received more money and we've saved more money, at the same time. So, it's good. That's how we're able to extend it.
Right, so then we talked about, and it says right in our commitment statement, that we wouldn't ask for another override for at least 4 years.
Correct.
What I'm hearing is, it will not be 4 years, it'll be greater than 4 years.
Correct.
So
And this-
you're talking 5 to 7.
Yep.
But then I think also it's a conversation that we need to have about, where we are when we decide it's time to ask another question, because, we did a $5.5 million override in 2014 and then waited until it was really desperate and things were very dire, and then needed to go for a $9.5 million override, which was very large. Would you think that if we were clear about, the need and the timing, that we would be able to look for something smaller if we were, instead of always focusing on stretching it as absolutely far as possible, kind of tried to hit a sweet spot so that we were asking for a more reasonable number instead of such a large number? I don't know if that makes any
Yes.
sense.
Yeah, there will be a sweet spot, right? There will be a time where you have to ask for more than we asked for last time because you waited too long. There would be a time where we could start to, we could request a lesser amount, and not completely deplete the override stabilization fund and really keep everything super smooth. So that would reduce the spike in the tax bill and, you know, and get us a reasonable duration, like another 4 years or something like that at least. So, you know, if you look over a 2 override cycle, you may be looking at a 10-year period. You know what I mean? So there is a sweet spot in there where, it would be, there's a point where it would be too late to ask because it would be an unreasonably high ask versus kind of just feeding a consistent amount of revenue into the system.
If I might, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Right, because it seems like we want to try to avoid a situation where we're spiking in a tax bill.
Yep.
That people get sort of used to, a tax bill being in a certain place. And I think that we kind of got ourselves into a situation, you know, not just this board, but where sewer rates had to be raised. And then, you know, the tax bills went up. And just it kind of snowballs and people really start to feel it. And I think that, you know, in my opinion, it would be important to try to ease those spikes as best we can with careful planning and making sure that we're, you know, just being really overly communicative with residents about where we are and what it means. Sure, we can wait, but that means you're going to see this kind of an impact, whereas, you know, you're going to have more of a steady state if we don't wait until things are beyond the point of repair to ask.
I think the other thing is you gotta look at the capital plan.
Yes.
And the debt service. Because that's gonna play into it too.
When you need that. Yep. And I feel like the knowledge that we've built since March of 2021 and understanding what happens when we have more revenue in one category, less revenue in another category, when we put money into override stabilization, when we take it out, like I feel like I have a much better understanding of what that actually means now. So I think that would be able to give us options when we ask the next override that even, you know, if you pick the number that we need to ask for and you ask it in the appropriate year, like we may not have to raise all that in the next year, right? So it would be available to us, but we could, you know, have that flexibility to keep tax bills low, kind of like what we did the first time, right? We asked for 9.5 million, but we didn't raise 9.5 million in the first year. That wasn't our plan, but that was a result of the finances and how we saw them when we were setting the tax rate. So kind of understanding that and being able to kind of project that out even further than we did in the past, I think will be helpful as well. It'll allow us to keep tax bills more consistent over time.
Just one quick point, but that's the benefit of strategic planning and the interplay with all of this, right? Because the numbers we see here still, while we're talking about revenues and then the projections here, how the expenditures play out may be different than while the aggregate number may be there, depending how the plan rolls out. And as we incorporate the residents' priorities, that how we see it today, a year from now may be quite different, understanding that we have the limitations and the commitment, but things that we do today we may not be doing tomorrow. So there's still another exercise to happen while this long-term model is invaluable for all the reasons that Beth talked about in terms of communicating and certainty and not having a cliff.
Yep.
I think it also is useful as we continue to work through that strategic plan and understand what it actually means in our operations. And you get everyone rowing in the same direction. I think that this tool will be invaluable, but I think we'll be taking twists and turns along the way, living within the commitments, but the buckets that they're in may differ.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the other thing is, it's not a one-sided coin. You gotta look at the expense side too.
yep.
I still think conservative approach on the expense side is an important part of it. I mean, things are what they are. We can only control the revenue so much with the economy. Can only control the expense so much with the economy, but I think erring towards the conservative expenditures helps it too, because saving a little bit here, and if you get a little bit more there, it helps smooth it out. So, a lot of modeling.
Yeah.
I know you're good at that.
Maybe we should go to that real quick.
Sure.
If there's any questions on the
Anybody else have any, did you?
I just wanted to comment, as we talk about, the lifespan of the override that was passed last year, just for people that may be watching from home, and during the May town meeting, several tax relief options were passed at town meeting to help, especially with income eligible seniors. So for anybody that may be watching from home and have concerns about, a few years down the line, this may be a conversation that's happening again. There is it on the assessor's website?
Yep.
So on the assessor's website, there's information about tax relief options for seniors, so.
So, kind of going right at the issue that we have been discussing, we have worked to develop a new 5-year financial projection. And what we're including on the screen here is the final numbers for fiscal year 23 and 22 and 23, and then forecasting forward for fiscal year 24 through 28. So fiscal year 24, just to be clear, would be year 3 of the 2021 override. So we had originally projected that the override would last through fiscal year 25. At this point, we'll talk about the details. So I do just want to affirm that the revenues that are shown in the forecast for fiscal year 24 in column K on the screen are the same as the numbers that we use in the revenue manual, with one exception. And that one exception is utility revenue. And the reason that I have not adjusted the utility revenue to match the $20 million that's in the revenue manual is because I wanted to be ensured that I wasn't overly anticipating indirect revenue that would benefit the operating budget. So I've used the fiscal year 23 numbers to really make sure that the indirect revenue that comes in isn't overly influencing the numbers, especially I don't want them to influence it in a negative way, where we're anticipating that we would get more indirect revenues in to benefit the operating budget and provide more overall resources than we may actually have. So that's the only difference. So the bottom lines aren't perfect because they're off by a couple $100,000 due to those differences, but the net difference in utilities is the most meaningful here, and that's why we've taken this approach. So no negative impacts from doing that. So as we look forward, really the tax base is a simple calculation that we use based upon the what we can do underneath Proposition 2.5. I will point you to line 9 from override stabilization. This is where we'd use funds from the override stabilization that we've placed there in prior years. And thus far, we have a little over $6 million in override stabilization from our first 2 deposits. You can see for fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25 at this point, we're not anticipating on drawing down from the override stabilization account. Again, fiscal year 25 was that initial final year of the 4-year commitment. So,
Can I interrupt you for a second? Is this using the base numbers of?
so we'll get to that now because we're going to head down to the charge section, but yes.
Okay.
Yep. So Taylor, if you can just scroll down. So the top, what I had on the screen there, or what is on the screen there, was the revenues. And we used conservative estimates across the board. And now what's primarily on the screen is our anticipated charges. And I've run 2 scenarios for the board, kind of the 2 guardrails of your commitment to the community, the base increase on the municipal and education expenditures, and the maximum increase, which we'll talk about in a minute. So this is the base increase of 3.5 or 4.25. In all scenarios, especially given inflationary pressures and the shared operating support line item, I've used the maximum increase of 6.65% each year. That includes things like health insurance. I think 6.65% may not even be enough, but so we have that at the maximum increase. So I'm not going to talk a lot about the details behind those expenditures because we don't have them. We're really modeling based on percentages. But I want to slide down to line 65, which is the transfers to override stabilization. So what you can see for fiscal year 24 in this model, I am showing that we can contribute another $1.75 million into the override stabilization account. So continuing to build the stabilizing feature of the fiscal year or of the 2021 override. And then if we look forward to column L in the FY25 forecast, you can see that we're not placing funds into the override stabilization account in fiscal year 25. So this is the first time in any of the models that we used in any fiscal year where we weren't either putting money in or taking money out. So fiscal year 25, we're not placing money into override stabilization and we're not taking it out. So it's truly like a pivot year for the model as it plays out right now. So I'll jump down now to just above the red line, which is line 68 that says surplus or deficit. So you can see using this revenue and expenditure model, I'm projecting balanced budgets through the end of fiscal year 27, again at the base expenditure rates for the municipal and education budget, but then predicting a $3.5 million deficit occurring in fiscal year 28. So overall, our finances, really because of new growth, unprecedented new growth in fiscal year 23, that came in at $1.65 million, which is about 70% higher than our initial estimates. We have a lot of economic growth continuing in the community. If those trends continue, that will continue to push the tax levy up without increasing tax bills, which will be beneficial. Maybe that deficit could continue to go down. But Taylor, if you can just slide back up, I want to talk about line 9 again. So the real lines that we're looking at in these financial models is how much is going into override stabilization, how much are we spending in the operating budget, and then how much is being taken out of override stabilization. So line 9 being a revenue line is money that would be coming from override stabilization. You can see within the forecasted year, fiscal year 26, 27, and 28, we deplete all the money that was put into it. And despite putting $2.6 million from override stabilization into the revenue model in fiscal year 28, we're still driving that $3.5 million deficit at the bottom. So this is where we really start to think, when's the right time to ask the question. So if the board would just indulge me to go to the maximum increase so we can just compare those two really quick, and then I think that would allow for the best conversation. So so this being the bottom, Taylor, can you scroll down, actually go to the expenditures? So what I really want to talk about here is, so in this model, we're using the maximum expenditure, which is 0.5% greater each and every year in the education and municipal. So we're spending 4.5% increase, 4.75% increases in education and 4% increases in municipal. And what happens when you do that is you begin to run a deficit a full year earlier, and it's almost an equal deficit to what was in fiscal year 28 and 27. So you have about a $3.5 million deficit shown in FY 27, and then an unpalatable $9.5 million deficit in fiscal year 28. So the big pivot points in this, if you can scroll up, Taylor, I talked about fiscal year 25 being not putting any money into override stabilization and not taking any money out of override stabilization in the base model. Well, what's happening here is we're putting less money into override stabilization in fiscal year 24, and in fiscal year 25, we're drawing $1.2 million out of override stabilization. So the combination of those two things really accelerate our use of override stabilization and we get to a deficit sooner. And then, just showing fiscal year 28, it gets a lot bigger since we were in deficit in 27. So this is really the comparison points of how accurate are the revenues that we're projecting and predicting through this forecast, and then how much do we spend. Historically, even though our models are sound and there's nothing in this model that I would say is too conservative or harmful, and it's conservative, we're being conservative and harmful for us. There's not much that I would change. We've always seen those revenues exceed what we've put in here, which has really benefited us and allowed us to extend it. Something in the middle of these two guardrails would mean that, you'd be looking at a lesser deficit in fiscal year 27 and still no deficit in fiscal, maybe, no deficit in 27 and a smaller one in 28, something like that. So a lot to work through, but all just models, but you can really see the impact of what those expenditure patterns have on the long term and when you may be wanting to ask the question. If I had to advise the board, when would I ask a question regardless of the expenditure model right now, it'd be sometime in calendar year 2026. So, still 3 years or so away from that.
Yes, a question.
Sure.
So in the revenue projections, in talking about potential new growth, on some of these big commercial things that are coming down the pike, those aren't in there, are they?
No,
Only the certain things like the Northbridge project would be in there.
right.
Market Basket, obviously. would
Yeah.
be in there. The other stuff isn't in there yet.
It's not in there, no.
So
we-
they break ground.
Right, yep. I get a little bit nervous to be too aggressive with that. Because when we're conservative, it provides benefits. When we're too aggressive, it doesn't come to fruition, then it,
Right.
makes us run around and do things faster than we thought we had to, so.
Yeah, I think it makes you stay vigilant.
Yeah.
What happens in the economy in the next year could be really the driver that's gonna decide how that's gonna happen.
Yeah,
Because it either could be boom, or it could be a bust.
right.
So I still think on the spending, you gotta go, especially with that, until we know where the economy's gonna head and how these things are gonna shake out. Till you start seeing something go in the ground, I think you gotta go with the conservative spending model. Even though it's tempting to go the other way, I think, until you know for sure. I'd rather build up the kitty and have it there.
What are we seeing for, at least with respect to capital projects, what are you seeing for inflation there? Is it really hurting our ability to do what we want to do? Are we starting to see that yet? And that's just one area I look at, our number pulled out as we're looking across here, that we're remaining constant, and we know that the purchasing power is not there. What are we seeing right now?
I think it's mainly impacting the utilities, and, Dave could maybe comment on it, or Jeff. What we originally estimated in 2018 for water main replacement versus what we actually get from it now. I think that's a pretty good example.
Yeah, it might have been about $2 million to do a main, 1 mile of water main in 2018, but now it's 3.2. So, and that's sort of a similar cost we're seeing across the board for water and sewer utility projects, whether it's a pump station or it's water main. And it's the cost of materials and such that are driving a lot of that.
So more pressure on the enterprise funds than really looking, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the biggest purchases that we normally make outside of the enterprise fund and the annual capital budget is like major highway equipment or, you know, major roadway equipment within DPW, and those costs are going up, but, you know, they're not quite at the magnitude of, you know, 50% or whatever that we're seeing in some other cost areas.
Or if there were some building improvements that weren't eligible for reimbursement, but they had to be done. Could be
Yep.
another cost driver.
Could be.
One other question, if I may. So on the landfill on Ash, I know in the revenue manual, we're thinking 28 when the contract ends. Hope is longer period than that. But don't we have to build another contingency here? Because that will drive the guardrails, right? Because it's a significant number and you're going to have a much larger cliff if that
Right.
doesn't happen.
That's true.
When does that become a reality, or is that something that we keep in the back of our mind? Because that will drive our behavior, right, as soon
Yep.
as possibly next year.
Yep.
I mean, it's crystal balling it, and that's not ideal.
Yep.
We're not gonna know tomorrow, but that's a big number, and to have recurring revenues and then, or recurring expenses against that revenue, and then to lose that is a challenge too.
Yeah, I think we'd probably be in our best interest, which I can do, you know, tomorrow, is reach back out to Don Musial at Win or Wheelabrator and, just, you know, based upon the most recent, what do they call it, air survey or
Okay.
whatever it is, just see what the capacity is left with the existing cells that are permitted. You know, if he says, you know, we're good through 2030, maybe we,
Then we don't see that here.
yeah, take a deep
Okay.
breath, you know, but know that it's still out there. If it is 2028, you're right, we need to start to lessen our reliance upon that.
It's something that, at a minimum, needs to be in the back of our mind, if not in the model. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Kevin, if I were just to break it down into sort of its simplest form, that between these two models, the revenue is consistent.
Same.
It's
Yep.
just the amount that we're budgeting. So between the models, the base and the max, is there anything critical to the town that you feel that we are not investing in, if we were to go with the more, I call it conservative base model, or scenario?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's the best answer, but I mean, I think that my biggest concern for the fiscal year '24 budget, or one of my big concerns for the fiscal year '24 budget is that same word, inflation, but more on wage inflation, right? Like, what am I doing to retain the employees that we have? And, you know, 3.5%, you know, cost of living increase was really, you know, as you know, being a former personnel board member, never even part of our conversations, but like, I think if you gave a 3.5% cost of living increase this year, people would be like, well, that's not a cost of living increase. So, yeah, I mean, I think that simple things like that, even at those lower numbers, you know, let alone, I mean, we even know Selco, much better than a lot of other utilities, is, you know, going up 12 and 15% on the bills. You know, we pay electric bills too, and I think inflation just in general, even to continue to provide the same services. We've already had the conversation with department heads, like, we're not, you know, adding staff, like, you know, it's gonna have to be a pretty lean year as far as FTEs, because we've gotta kind of maintain. But I do think even that simple thing will be pushing up against that 3%, 3.5%. So, it'll be a challenge.
I agree with what Mrs. Cassavant said in terms of we committed to stabilization and not creating a cliff. And I hear from residents on both sides where they want the lowest tax, you know, increase possible, and others who would prefer that we go to the maximum levy so that we don't have to be as tight on some of our expenses as possible. But I agree with what you said. I mean, again, in its simplest form, the revenue is still there if needed. But what we're saying is we're not going to budget to spend it unless, you know, there are extenuating circumstances, and we're reinvesting that in the town, you know, again, to create the stabilization so that a future override is more tolerable than it might otherwise be.
maybe I shouldn't say this, but I will. So like if I look at the base model and look how far off we've been from our original calculation, like FY '28 over the next 3 years will kind of take care of itself. So it's like really, do you know what I mean? Like those numbers are just evident in the growth that we've talked about, how much the tax base has increased. Now, maybe the tax base won't increase as rapidly as it has because there won't be as much construction if there is an economic turndown. But like the $3.4 million number certainly doesn't scare me. But at this point, like it's either, obviously the $9 million number on the higher scenario, or the whatever the number would be in FY '29 and the base scenario is the number that scares me, which is why I would even want to, which is why I said like calendar year 26, because it just gives you the time to not do it. I mean, I'll also just kind of focus everyone back that, we had about a $5 million deficit that we are looking at filling in the fiscal year 21 budget, and we asked for $9.5 million. So we could get the duration. So, right, so we can't stare $9.5 million in next, the proverbial next year's budget and raise $9.5 million and have a override that lasts more than 1 year. Like that's where we're going to have to plan for this.
Mm-hmm.
Same painful discussion we had the last. Okay. Anything else?
Do you want to just walk us through next steps in the entire process? I know that this is just the beginning.
Yeah, it's just the beginning. So we'll come back at at your next meeting on December 6th. We'll have proposed financial objectives. We'll review the financial policies to make sure there's nothing we want to change there, but they're normally pretty stable. At that time, in between then, I would just like to talk to board members about these two models and the expenditure level and what we're trying to target. The school committee will be at your next meeting, so part of that conversation will have to be kind of a replay of this and getting on the same page. We'll go from there.
You sure they're going to be at our next meeting?
I'm pretty sure December 6th is when they're coming in.
We'll have to talk about that.
Okay. I thought they were. That was my understanding, but I could be
But there's a
wrong on my
lot.
date.
I think there were a few topics in addition to the
Yep.
commitment and meeting the first or the second time that we talk about. There were other things, so
Okay.
we can figure that out when we do the 2-2.
Sounds good.
We'll see.
And then, get a feeling from the board on what my budget target will be for the municipal budget as we go into that and send that guidance out. So, all coming up in the next few weeks.
Yes.
I want to acknowledge the work that goes into this kind of modeling, to have to model the two scenarios, the base and then going a little bit higher, and also just, you're predicting. And I know that can be difficult, and so I just want to thank you and your
Sure.
team for the
Yep.
work that you did to put this together.
A lot of help. Alex Martinez deserves the credit for the entire revenues. She did the heavy lifting in the revenue manual and pulling it all together, and then we just forecast it out from there. So a lot of work done by her.
Where can residents find the slides from tonight if they're interested in looking at them a little closer?
So we'll be creating the we have a financial page on the town manager and select board, I think, and it link right from there, Taylor. Is there a financial page off the select board? So we'll just post them right up on there on the financial buttons on both of our pages, and they can go and view them.
Thank you.
I have a question. So one of the main drivers on everybody's tax bills that they pay, their property tax bills, we have the tax levy. We also have, debt exclusions and capital investments. Are there any projects that you see that may need to happen, with our most recent override? There was also the police station, which was a large project, and And Beale, the new Beale school was shortly before that. So there were a lot of changes, big projects and big changes over the last few years. Do you see any debt exclusion, like needs for debt exclusions or big, big investments that we would need to make over the next few years in addition to starting to talk about the next override?
I mean, I think part of that conversation will come whenever you meet with the school committee and the K through 12 report. I mean, I think, there'll always be a school project on the horizon. On the municipal side of things, if I think of major capital projects, we are still struggling for space here at the town hall, but we're working on a couple things to minimize the project there if needed. We have the cemetery expansion, but within these models, I think it shows that it can be covered without increasing the tax levy, so doing it within the levy limit. The other major, capital thing that sits out there, I think on the municipal side, is just our DPW operations down at the highway, or down at the highway barn, 211 South Street, includes water and sewer. Those are aging facilities that, do need to be looked at within, kind of the next 10 years. So how that plays out with the timing of the override, we just need to, we know both will need to happen. We just have to make sure it doesn't have an undesirable tax impact of it being too clustered together, right? We just need to be smart about when we do it. So capital projects are always going to be there. Operating needs are always going to be there. We just need to provide that predictability that we've promised to residents as they come up.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay, on to the next item. Yes? No, I said on to the next item.
I know you were asking me. Sure, go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
My eyes are starting to glaze over. The next item is to review and act to appoint one member to the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee to fill an open seat for a one-year term set to expire on June 30th, 2023, for a high school age junior or senior Shrewsbury resident. We have 4 individuals who applied. I hope I get these right. Yaram Ponsar, Devan Goel, George Hanna, Laura Lee. Does anybody have any person they would like to nominate?
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Cassian?
I think I was blown away by the resumes and the cover letters and the interest, from the 4 high school students. Junior year, I have a junior, Mrs. Flynn has a junior. There's barely time to breathe, much less think about something like this. So I was just thrilled to have all of these students come forward and offer to share their time with us. And it's a very, very difficult decision to make. I would love to appoint all 4 of them, but we do need to just choose one. I'm going to nominate George Hanna. He's a first-generation U.S. citizen of Egyptian descent who attends St. John's High School.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
I just want to echo what Ms. Cassavant said, that these students, they absolutely blew me away. Their resumes, I mean, we're looking at 5- and 6-page resumes for some of these kids, and that's absolutely astounding. We're really lucky to have the interest that we had here and just have these young people in our community. And like you said, I wish we could appoint all 4 of them. But I hope that this is not the last that we see of these names. And I'm really looking forward to seeing, where they go. These are just really, really incredible young people. So thank you for applying and being interested in, being part of your community. So local government makes a difference, and it really is encouraging to see young people interested and involved.
Yeah.
So
I think I got to fit my resume on a gum wrapper in high school. So
I love you now.
So we have the Does anybody want to place any other names in? Or
You know, Mr. Chairman, Beth made my job easy because you basically said everything that I was planning to say. I also felt a little inferior by some of the resumes that were submitted. But same thing, I would take all four in a heartbeat. And I also had my nomination for George Hanna. I really appreciated his story of, you know, being born to immigrant parents, but just his experience in being at St. John's and how he's been embraced and how he wants to pay that forward in this community. I just think that his perspective and his initiative and what's driving him to apply for this is really compelling to me. So that's why I seconded the nomination, but just wanted to, not to belabor the point, but reiterate the same sentiments.
Okay. Okay, so are we ready to vote? Okay, then.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Samia.
Even though I agree with the comments, I'm going to actually have a different person that I'd like to put up to nominate. I think that Shivam Goel, currently a junior at the high school, also to me resonated with the comments that were made here in terms of the positive message, Shrewsbury Wellness, the idea of seeing all types of people in all walks of life and moving forward. So I think they're all excellent. I just would like to nominate Shivam Goel.
Second.
Okay. Okay, so we have two people in. Any further comments? Okay. Then take George first, I guess. George was the first one nominated. So, those in favor of appointing George Hanna, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed?
Aye, I guess. Not that opposed, I think we can win with all of them, just happens to be that I wanted to go with
So,
different
what is it, 3-1?
I hate to use the term opposed. I mean, I guess I appreciate the majority, and I will vote in for George. But I think I did have Shivam as my nomination. But it was one of the hardest decisions I've had to make on this board to date. So I think I will abstain in saying in saying opposition on that.
Okay.
So
That's fine, you can do that.
yeah.
Okay. And then for Shivam, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We have two. Okay. Opposed?
Again, it's so it's not an
I
opposition.
know.
It's so uncomfortable.
I
to try-
know.
It's the
We're not
formality.
opposed, but I think what we're seeing is there's a majority for George, and so without having to oppose, I guess I'll abstain too.
So we have 2 votes and 3 abstentions?
I don't know. I guess
However it works.
we need a better way to do this.
Is that- Well, I think you gotta learn how to read the tea leaves.
I agree.
Okay, well,
No, I think it's good to have this.
we have 3 in favor of George and 2 in favor of Shivam, so George is the person who we've selected.
That's true.
Okay, so we'll get a letter out to George. Okay, next order of business is to review and act on the extension of Select Board Policy 25, Water and Sewer Bill, partial abatements. I would like to say that I do know the position of the Water Department in engineering at DPW. I think we should continue this for another year, and the reason is because we have not finished the second round of flushing yet. I know there's been a couple of issues, and maybe it hasn't risen to the occasion of causing problems in households yet, but I do know of at least one where there was a problem, and the filter caught it, and coincidentally, I heard this morning from somebody when I was having coffee that they had an issue. It's not costing us any money right now. It's not gonna hurt to have it for another year. I would feel more comfortable keeping it in place and having it in place so we don't have to revisit it again if we start to get some complaints. Have it in place. If it's not costing us any money right now, it's not hurting anything. If we don't need to use it, we don't use it. After we make it through the second year, which we said we were gonna do because we needed to go through and make that second round, try to get more assurance that we know that it's clean, and then take it off. That would be my recommendation, but I don't know what anybody else thinks. Mrs. Hami?
Mr. Chairman, I'm fine with that. I think that while the records indicate there hasn't been a claim for damages in the last 2 years, I think we should stand behind the second round of unidirectional flushing. And if there's not a claim, it's fine. Then a year from now, we're having this discussion and let it go. And it works as well. We're looking at our policies now anyways, and we'll take time to go through our policies. So I would be fine with keeping it for another year, and we can revisit it then with the hope that there aren't claims, but also standing behind our work and our residents and keep it in force for another year. So I agree with that.
Anyone else?
I'm always partial to the recommendation by the department head, and I know, I don't know if you, Mr. Mizikar, or anyone else has any objection to this, but I agree with the comments that it sounds like no harm in continuing it. So if that is the case, then.
Yeah, I believe that is the case, yeah. I mean, I think Mr. Rowley was trying to relieve the board of having to have the concern over it, but having the policy in place, if something does pop up, makes it easier. We have something to follow.
I think did you have something?
No, I agree with what you're saying, that it's not hurting us to have the policy there. I think it only provides a little peace of mind to residents, that they know that if something were to occur, that they have something to fall back on to get some help with any damages.
Can I ask, when you said the second phase is not completed yet, or do you know when that's projected to be done?
Mr. Howland? Already started the second phase, right? Or the second round?
For the record, Jeff Howland, DPW Director. They're starting the second round this fall. We did not do it earlier due to the drought during the earlier in the fall, so they were going to start later this fall. It all depending on weather at this point, and then they'll go in earnest in the spring.
And then you'll finish it up.
Right. So even when we've had several water main breaks or leaks, we actually have not received any dirty water complaints, where in the past it would have been significant.
Mm-hmm.
We also used to see, we are now back testing hydrants, which we had stopped that testing of hydrants due to the complaints that we used to receive. And we have not, we retest hydrants almost, I wouldn't say a weekly basis, but significant amount of, especially with all the new development, we are testing hydrants and we have not received complaints. So
we just
and I'd like to know that where that one that you just mentioned a few minutes ago is, if you know where that address is.
One of them that the gentleman is going to get back to me tomorrow. The other one, I already talked to Deanne about one of them. That happened a few weeks ago, but the filter caught it, and there was an event that happened. So, but I think just finish that second round so we have that assurance. Not costing us anything.
Correct.
And we got it there if there's an issue.
That's fine.
Thank you for all the work that you guys have done, to clean up our water mains and
We still have a long way to go, but we are.
Shrewsbury water right in here, so I appreciate it.
The first round in the plant has really significantly reduced the manganese.
Thank you.
Took a long time to get there. It's gonna take a little while to get it out. Okay, so you have a motion on this article?
Yeah, I move that we extend Select Board Policy 25, Water and Sewer Bill Partial Abatements.
Second.
Extend it till when?
Until
Year.
a year from now, so November of 2023, right? That would make sense.
Sounds good. Okay, we have a second? Did somebody second it? Yes?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 13 is to review and act on a one-day beer and wine license application of Julie Parent, Rotary Club of Shrewsbury, Town Center Association Yuletide Market on December 3rd from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Item 14 is to review and act on a one-day beer and wine license request of JT Ethia Greater Good Imperial Brewing Company, 55 Millbrook Street, Worcester, for the Shrewsbury Town Center Association Yuletide Market on December 3rd, 2022, from 3:30 to 8 p.m.
Mr. Chairman, should the hours there be till 9?
These are what they, no, it ends at 8.
I know, but don't you leave it an extra hour because you're still cleaning up
He
the,
requested, I suppose.
we can't change it, right?
Did we have to advertise it? No. We could do it till 9. Yeah, okay, if somebody wants to make that motion.
Okay, so I move that we approve the one-day beer and wine license request of JT Ethier Greater Good Imperial Brewing Company, 55 Millbrook Street, Worcester, Mass, for the Shrewsbury Town Center Association Yuletide Market on December 3rd, 2022, from 3:30 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Item 15 is to review and act on a streetlight request from Rajiv Papu, 1 Grove Meadow Lane, for streetlights to be installed at the intersection of Lake Street and Grove Meadow Lane. Mr. Samir, I think you had a comment that you wanted to make?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I had an opportunity on November 3rd to meet with Mr. Papu and his neighbors, just to get eyes on where they're looking to put a streetlight. It is dark at Grove Meadow Lane, particularly dark, and it's a blind corner as they're coming from the one-way up to Lake Street. So I would ask, or respectfully ask, that the streetlights go to the light department to look at this. The other thing that I think, just to give context, a couple other concerns related to volume, and there was a traffic study done by Andy Truman, town engineer, back in December of 2021 on number of cars, and that related to whether or not there should be a truck restriction because of the truck volume, and it wasn't found to be 5% of large trucks, but we didn't have a speed study. So one thing that I did see there is that it is a dark road, as just something to consider, at least one streetlight in that area, noticing the difference or distance between streetlights on that road and the expected volume increase. So if we could send it over for that, and as well possibly Mr. Mizikar also, either December 21, if we also assess speeds, but also look at speeds, because cars were going at a good clip on that road. The road's relatively narrow, and as we expect volume to increase and our school being on that, if we could look at that now and at least have a baseline. Yep. So just a couple things.
You looking for speed?
Two things. One, just in favor of the request that we get this looked at.
Lights, but.
And then the second piece, either get information from that December 2021 traffic study that we had, or drop a box there to see what the speeds are during a period of time, just to see what we have as a baseline, number of cars,
Sure.
speeds.
Mr. Holland, when you do one of the traffic counts for trucks or whatever, you pick up everything, right? Like if you did the thing on Lake Street and you just gave the report on the trucks, you would have the cars and you'd have the speed, right?
Yes.
So you
We may already have the data.
yeah.
So what I'll do is, I just actually wrote a note, so I'll ask Andy tomorrow, but we typically have the data. If we do not, we typically don't like doing the traffic studies in the winter, or as we get close to winter, because that skews the numbers. Now, we do have the electronic ones, that makes it easier, but the old ones with the tubes, if there was any chance there may be a plow event, we made that mistake about 10 years ago.
Well, if we could get it, great.
Yeah, but I would say we probably have it.
Okay, that's helpful too. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll send the request over to the light department to check out that. Okay.
I have a question regarding traffic on Lake Street. So your assessment of the street is absolutely correct. I live just up the road off of Lake Street. And it is narrow and dark. And, you know, with the assessment that was made in December of 2021, is there plans, like, is there anticipation of what the changes in traffic and traffic patterns might be when Market Basket opens? And are there any plans for like reassessing that once that plaza is like fully operational?
There was no traffic study required for that. But after it opens, we can ask engineering to do that.
Okay. All right.
Be a good baseline too,
Absolutely.
the information.
Yeah, you know, I just have concerns like being familiar with that road, how narrow it is, and you know, with the bus traffic, school bus traffic right now, you know, I have concerns if there's truck traffic in addition to school buses that could make for a dangerous,
Yep.
you know, dangerous conditions.
A couple of
So,
blind spots too, right?
Yeah.
Particularly here when I was staying
At
there.
Grove
You see,
Meadow.
yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the concerns that the residents had is it gets dark early. A lot of young kids in that neighborhood, and the concern that they're not going to see the cars coming up. It's not lit and wouldn't be able to see them. But it was dark there. It was noticeably dark as you go up Lake Street. And it comes, particularly Beale, you see the lights that are there. But before then, there seems to be a decent distance and the narrowness, as
Yeah.
you were saying. So I think it's worth taking a look at. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll ask Mr. Howland to put that on his list. If Market Basket ever opens.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So item 16 is to review and act on the 2022 affordable housing rent increase request from Madison Place in Shrewsbury. We have a letter from the, from Rowan McAllister, the Assistant Town Planner, saying the request, what?
Need a vote on item 15.
Okay, but I would have just sent it, but, okay, we have a vote to send the request for the light.
Yeah, move
light
approval.
department.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted, there we go. Okay. Item 16 is to review and act on the 2022 affordable housing rent increase request for Madison Place in Shrewsbury. Rowan McAllister said that the application meets the requirements and it's in compliance with the regulatory agreement, BHCD. This is similar to the other requests we've had and approved. So what is the pleasure of the board?
Just a quick question. Do
Yep.
these just come in on a rolling basis?
They come in on, yeah, I think they're annual based
rolling.
on, yeah.
Okay.
Properties?
Different properties have different dates. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's up to them to request it, so they don't
Right.
have the opportunity to change it unless they request it, so.
Okay. And they requested at different times?
Yeah.
Yep.
And only once per year?
Mhm.
All right. Move approval.
Second?
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay, item 17 is an email dated October 28th from Mary Thompson, retiree now, thanking us for the gift from her retirement. And this gentleman here is the new Mary Thompson. And it's already got his imprint on. David's got his own new desk in there with no chair. And it's not because we're cheap, we didn't want it. 18 is an email dated October 30th from Bernie and Kathleen Folletta, 22 Colton Lane, regarding the neighborhood meeting that was held on the 25th. Thanking Kevin for coming out and saying that even though there was some contention there, that most people were thankful that he had the meeting and were appreciative of going out there and having the dialogues. So noted, an email dated November 3rd from Alo Swakwer, Iandoli Austin's 2, DBA Austin Liquors, There's a question on if they had to renew the license that was being transferred, and that was answered by the staff. So noted. Item 20 is an email dated November 8th from Shelby Marshall, Westboro Select Board, regarding the Quarter 4 22C MPO touching base on a few items of interest. So noted. Item 21 is an email dated November 8th from Adrian Reynolds, 37 Rosedale Ave, regarding a Board of Health reinspection, number 4 of Rosedale Ave, 37 Rosedale Ave, and a memorandum response, so noted. Item 22 is a letter received November 10th from Nick Repetka, Highway Division Manager, snowplow update. Mr. Repetka said they have contracted 25 pieces of private equipment for the winter season so far. We use signing bonuses this year to entice contractors to sign up with us, because we and many other communities are having trouble getting contractors to sign up. And they're in discussions with 5 more contractors, and so we have 25 private contractors, we have 20 town vehicles, and 5 more under discussion, so hopefully we're ready. Item 23 is a ZBA decision dated October 24th. McGovern Auto Group, Inc., doing business as McGovern Collision for 2 special permits and 2 variances, 420 Boston Turnpike. So noted. And item 24 is a ZBA decision of October 24th. The Scrappy Pet Enterprises LLC for a variance on property, or for a property located at 810 Boston Turnpike. So noted. Is there anything else to come before the board in open session? Nope. There being none, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
And all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Have a nice Thanksgiving.